does it take to be a product leader? What does a good product leader look like? You might work with some, you might read about them, you might consider yourself to have some of these good capabilities, but I'd love to get your 2 cents on what makes a great product leader. So you can drop it in the Zoom chat or unmute if you'd like to discuss it. Let's see. I'll try and get a suggestion from everyone. Very curious. No right or wrong answers here. All right, Margaret. Cool. Great at delegating different parts of building a great product. Valerie, maybe the same traits as a leader, confidence, vision, empathy, great communicator. Yeah, great communicator is definitely a really good one to call out. And a confidence piece as well. I think the more that you trust and believe in your leader and where you're going, that's a really big one. Someone that's great at corralling everyone around a vision and influencing through data, insights, and all the other good stuff. Yeah, spot on, David. So yeah, some great suggestions there. Certainly some things that resonate with myself as well. So I think just bringing it back down to reality, like why do you need strong product leaders within an organization? Now, this is probably going to be pretty, pretty recognizable stats for you that more than 30,000 consumer products launch each year. 95% of them miss the mark, and 90% of startups fail as well. Now, if you think about, I was just watching a presentation around AI-driven SaaS products this year. What does it mean for the use cases? What is the difference between being a founder or someone working in a larger organization? I think one of the biggest risks that people are concerned about is just we're going to build more and more products that potentially are disconnected or not focusing on the right type of features or use cases. So in larger organizations, there's also a big risk of building products and features that companies don't use. So product leadership, especially in larger organizations, is really important because it's easy to have a mature product that's being used. It's got perhaps market fit or some stage of market fit, and teams continue to build features or use cases that aren't needed. And that's where product leaders and product managers play a really big role in making sure that what you're building is the right thing. I think one thing just to bear in mind in terms of why it's an exciting role and why it's important to lean into some of these attributes and skills that we're going to speak about today is that businesses with strong product leadership just significantly outperform everyone else. And you see this, especially across the large kind of product teams that have been dominating over the last year or two, much higher customer retention, much kind of faster acceleration of digital business, and just improved operational efficiency. Like how do teams work together? How do they build products? All the steps that they go through in the process as well. So it's being a strong product leader makes a big difference on your company as well. So perhaps that might be some good ammunition for yourself in terms of learning and development this year as well. One of the analogies that I like to use is when you're stepping into a product leadership role, there's a big mind shift change. So when you're working as a oh gosh, senior project manager, that's meant to say senior product manager. That was me quickly editing slides. So when you're working as a senior product manager, what got you to where you are now won't necessarily get you to where you want to be as a product leader. Now, for me, an analogy I like to use, and some of you may resonate with this, but who remembers when they learned how to drive? Hands up. If you remembered a little bit, yeah. So if you think back to that time, right? Before you started driving, you would just get in the car and sit there and like stare out the window, maybe play some music. You would be along for the ride. But when you started actually driving the car, that was a whole different world. There were so many other things you needed to think about that you hadn't considered before. And I remember my dad trying to tell me this framework of like, you got to have 10 and 2, you got to have your hands in the right place. And I think it's very similar to stepping into product leadership roles. Like people will try and give you these frameworks or these tools or these techniques, but it's the environment that's around you that's so different. And there's so many different areas that you need to improve on and focus on one at a time. So one of the biggest things that I like to speak about when folks are kind of going through this transition is it's important to recognize that what got you to where you are now won't necessarily get you to where you need to be as a product leader. So just to kind of run through this, and some of these slides I'll kind of speak to just at a high level, but just give you a little bit of a taste in terms of some of the stuff that we speak to. But as a product manager, you're really focusing on that product execution and the customer insight, right? Like you're executing, you're trying to get features out the door, you're hopefully they're more problem based, more outcome based. You're making sure that you're addressing the voice of the customer, that you're tying it back to the specific data that you have, that it drives business growth. But generally, most PMs are sitting in this kind of product execution space, a little bit of customer insights. Now, for product leaders, it shifts a lot to focusing on influencing people and product strategy. And this is what a lot of that time takes up. So for influencing people, it's about managing up, it's about managing senior leadership teams, it's communicating what you're doing, providing clarity. You're also leading your potential PMs or squads. And then there's a lot more stakeholder management involved as well. On the product strategy side, it's much more about how do you tie what you're actually building to the business outcome. So how does your business generate revenue? How does what the teams is focusing on actually going to generate revenue? Communicating that, being aware of that, building out your product vision and roadmap to make sure that you're driving kind of these key business metrics. And then finally, it all boils down to what is the impact that you're making strategically within your portfolio. So everything that your teams are doing, all the planning, the iterations, the cycles, how does that drive strategic impact? So for product leaders, a big shift focusing on influencing people and also product strategy. I'll just pause there for a moment. If there's any questions, you can unmute or also drop them in the chat as well. Otherwise, I'll keep going, but feel free to drop any questions in the comments. So I think one of the biggest things about this product leadership role and the story behind it is you need to not just focus on, sorry, you need to focus on landing the product, not just launching it. So it's about how do you holistically look at that product experience and make sure that when you're landing it, it's generating revenue, you're getting feedback from it, and it ties back into that strategic narrative that you're trying to tell internally to grow the business. So as a product leader, when I first stepped into it, so much more of my attention needed to work towards that. How is our product evolving as a whole and collection rather than just some of the sums of its parts as well. So what we've spoken about so far is really the key skills, the mindsets. Now, I want to double down a little bit on the key tenets of being an effective product leader. And with a specific focus on the impact and optics that you're trying to make within your organization. So the reason we call these two out is a lot of folks might be like, oh, okay, I'm doing these activities as a product leader, but I'm not thinking about how it looks internally. I'm not thinking about what is the impact I'm making. And they're two really important parts of stepping into that product leadership piece. So the three key areas we're going to speak about, it's your ability to execute, which is still really important as a product leader, but you're executing in slightly different areas. Your ability to generate impact and also build those optics also internally. So hopefully some of the stuff we speak about today, you're able to kind of reflect on what you're doing day to day in your own role and start to kind of evolve some of that. So we'll dive straight into it. On the execution side, so this is planning and quality of delivery. So I'll just speak to some of these, but some of these are the examples of what you would be doing as a product leader. Now, this can be for product leaders who are managing other PMs, also not managing them as well. So when I speak about product leadership, it's not necessarily just that management role. So on the execution side, there's a lot of different tasks in terms of people. So coaching and training PMs to be successful inside the organization and building a future kind of career path for them. On the operations side, it's about what is your prioritization process? You're not only thinking about prioritization, but how do we prioritize as a team? How do we prioritize across the different business units within the organization? So many product leaders I speak with have misalignment here, right? I see a few kind of head nods in terms of some of the pain that you might be feeling with that. But as a PM, when you're thinking about execution, you're looking more holistically. From there, I think another one to call out is looking at discovery, product discovery, and the channels. Like, how are your teams approaching product discovery? What is the quality of the questions? How long are they spending in product discovery? What's the cycle time, right? Versus just doing the product discovery. And then finally, on the product side, so these are a little bit more probably straightforward, but thinking about building the product strategy, thinking about your competitors and market analysis, and then starting to work through some of these more complicated use cases around like decisions of product features, product market growth, and product market fit as well. So on the execution side, there might be some new kind of areas here that would be really important as a product leader to start to focus on. The next component is thinking about the impact that you're trying to make, right? So when you step into a product leadership role or you're doing it, it's very easy to, okay, I'm coaching and training PMs, but am I seeing an improved NPS score within the team? Am I getting promotions? Is there strong support from business leaders because they're seeing confident product managers within the organization? They're the types of impact scores that you should be thinking about and considering because you're building a good and healthy team. The second one to think about on the operation side with an impact is, okay, we've improved our prioritization process, or at least we've tried. We've been quite thoughtful in terms of how do we do discovery, how do we approach it, what are the questions? Is there improvements in our product development lifecycle? Are we shipping faster? Are we going through the gates quicker? Does engineering have a better sense of what's happening? Are they involved in the conversations? And are we reducing costs to deliver? This is the most important thing as a product leader, right? What are the calories that we're burning becoming more effective? That's a really important component of it. And then finally, on the product side, so if we think about building these components here, are we seeing the business and product growth? Are we getting the revenue return? And are we increasing areas like customer satisfaction? Are all our efforts that our teams are doing actually driving that impact? So the impact part is a real important area as a product leader when you step into it. Now, just finally, optics. So this is a really important one to consider. It's how are you communicating internally? Do you have the engagement from the rest of the business and the organization? And is the perception the right one that you want to generate support? Now, for me, speaking from experience, this is where, as a product leader, it's that constant storytelling, the bringing people on the journey, making sure that there's no folks across the organization that are unsure about what you're doing or not confident in your abilities or your team's abilities. So that's really important. So on the optics side, some of the areas to consider here would just be around the PMs have confidence and clarity from their leader. That was one of the areas that we spoke about right at the beginning, like what makes a great product leader? Well, people have confidence in you, and you can get that through having conversations. Priorities are easy to communicate, right? You got a clear prioritization process. When you're speaking with other teams or folks, they understand what you're doing or not doing. A lot of leaders drop the ball on this. And visibility and clarity of roadmaps. I think that's probably one of the number one issues that product leaders face, where business leaders are trying to push things into the roadmap. They don't understand why they're doing things, or they don't have that clarity on what they're doing. So these are kind of the three key areas. I just want to pause here for a moment because what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of a discussion and exercise on what are some of the areas that you spend a lot of time on versus not, or if you have any kind of specific questions or areas that I could dive a little bit deeper in these three sections. So I'll pause there for a moment. Anything I can provide a little bit more clarity on? Is it all pretty straightforward? Maybe a thumbs up if it's all good. Okay. So if we really kind of boil it back to first principles, the impact that you can make within an organization is your execution times the optics. This optics part's so important. Like if you're not thinking about optics even in your own role at the moment, after this call, note down what you're going to start doing differently to be more visible within the organization and sharing more. Quick question, and you can put this into the chat, but which part of the 3x3 do you do most of or least of? So if there's some parts in here that you're not doing anything in, I'm keen to understand. Or maybe there are some areas that you're doing a little bit more on. That's going to help us for our next exercise. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes here. What are you doing least of or most of? What do you reckon? And if it's a lot of it, that's fine. You can say that.
Yeah, I guess in my role, I'm doing most of the execution, um, and then least optics, maybe.
Okay. Okay. So some kind of good areas to work on there. David, what about yourself? Or Ellen? I think Ellen was unmuted. Go for it, Ellen.
Yeah, sorry, I'm in my gym gear, so I'm going to I'm going to keep my camera off. Um, I was going to say, yeah, I think the good news is kind of think I'm ticking all of those. It's I think relatively though, it's the optics part again, and it's probably the continual reiteration of the narrative. Why we done, why we're doing what we're going to do, what impact do we think we're going to have, and then after kind of launch impact, whatever it is, how's it gone versus what we said, and not just celebrating the wins once, but reiterating the positives and negatives. So there's just that continual buy-in. I think that's the bit that probably under indexed on a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, spot on. Thanks, Ellen. David.
Yeah. So for me, I think executing at a people level when managing the ceremonies with the squad, that's what I'm doing probably the most at the moment. What I'm probably doing the least is um, uh, it's either between optics of kind of outlining a strategy to everyone or either the impact part of it. And I guess that's part of the challenge of working with a organization with thousands of people.
Yeah, that's fair, David. Thanks, mate. And Margaret, any kind of thoughts on this?
Yeah. So I'm mostly working on the execution bit as well, specifically on the operations bit. And what I feel like I'm doing the least is the impact bit of the product, where I'm really thinking about like how much revenue growth like I'm bringing to the company and all of that. It's something that I've been trying to learn as much as possible to do.
Nice, Margaret. Sounds like a good focus. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for sharing. It's always really interesting when you hear kind of what others are doing or not doing as well. I always find it a little bit reassuring. All right. So we're going to spend the second half of today, and then I'll share a template out after this. It's a super kind of easy and straightforward way, but I want you to have a little bit of a think about your growth plan on how you're going to get there. We try and keep it as easy as possible because we know how hard it is to commit to growth plans or PDB development and all that jazz. So I want to try and boil it down to something that hopefully is a little bit easier. So I think one of the first things I want to spend a couple of moments on is talking about growth and how do you get there. And one of the things I'm interested in is what does growth mean to you? Like when someone says, oh, I'm focusing on my growth or I want to grow in these areas, what does that mean? Um, yeah, take a minute or two, pop it in the comments. Curious what you think growth means. Or you have a growth mindset. We talk about it a lot in product, right? Oh, they have a growth mindset. What does that mean? And if it's easier, you can unmute as well. Yeah, I like that, Valerie. Continuously becoming better at a particular skill, demonstrating the skill repeatedly in similar situations in your career. Yeah, I like that. I like that continuous aspect of it. I think that's super important. Just save that one, Valerie. It's a good LinkedIn post for you.
Oh, which one?
Sorry, your comment there.
Oh, my comment. Yeah, thanks.
All right, we'll give it another couple minutes here. What do we reckon? What does growth mean to you? Be nice if Zoom had a typing thing so we knew if anyone was typing.
I'll just speak mine. So yeah, for me, it's less about, I guess, product, more about how do you have more impact as within the exco or whatever the relative leadership team is. So it's not just being the product person, but being that senior leader within the organization and having more impact on areas where you're not the expert, but you're opinionated and you need to make sure there's that alignment or challenge where necessary. That's kind of certainly the point I feel like I'm at the moment.
Yeah, no, I like that. And kind of stretching yourself and kind of trying to grow into that specific area with some of those kind of skills. And I think that kind of builds on what Margaret was mentioning here in terms of identifying those areas and making a plan to kind of upskill as well. Yeah, great thoughts, folks. So, yeah, I resonate a lot with what you kind of mentioned there. I think growth is something that should always be on, and for me, I think it's really what separates the good from the great PMs or the good from the great product leaders. It's like having this, and you've all signed up to this session today, so I'm sure a lot of you kind of have that mindset. And I think it's about all the knowledge you gain from your experience and where you invest your time and really being that sponge and going through trying different experiences, asking different questions, stretching yourself. And it's really a combination of all these elements of your role, professional development, and what you gain from different sources. And everyone learns very differently. So I want to speak a little bit about that and how you can incorporate that a little bit more into your personal development plan. So I think to help you enable your growth and start to shift more towards kind of some of the areas that you want to invest in, this is a bit of a mental model that we like to use. Again, it's not rocket science, but I think the first one is around understand where you want to go next in your career. And this doesn't just mean the next role, considering industries you want to work in, great companies, or particular types of work that you want to do as well. And then identify those details to avoid just the next available role or career path. I think that's a really, like for me, it was about I want to move country, I want to experience a different culture, I want to work in a different company, less about just trying to, I want that next step in my role, as an example. So I would encourage you to kind of start to define where you want to be next in your career and what does that look like. And then the second thing from there is identifying what are some of those core competencies required to reach that next goal. And that might be a mixture of skills and experiences as well. So once you do that, you'll start to identify a bit of a logical sequence to tackle some of those and don't do them all at once. We'll kind of break down a bit of a growth stack. And then I think the focus area is really important. So when you've identified kind of where you want to go, even if it's loosely, it's about picking that competency to focus on and to work to understand what are some of those core principles behind it. And this is where you can ensure that you're focusing your early 20% investment in learning to try and get 80% of growth, right? Like, what are those areas that you're focusing on that are really important? What are those core elements? And I get a lot of that from when I speak with previous mentors of mine or managers. It's how did you get into that position? What did you focus on? Well, for me, I knew that I was good at communication, so I wanted to double down on communication to be a better product leader. It's like, right, okay, I'm going to focus on that because it's going to get me 80% of the growth that I need versus focusing on one area that you have absolutely no experience in, and it's not actually that big a part of the role. So that's where focus and identifying some of those things is really important. And I'm actually a big believer in focusing on your strengths as well. Like, what are you really good at, and how can you double down on that so you're 90% better than anyone else in that role? Of course, weaknesses are important, but I'm a big believer in the strength aspect as well. And then I think finally, really kind of you can gain a lot from growing your kind of core understanding with experience and peer insight. So who you're speaking with, who you're surrounding yourself with, the programs you're taking, that's a really kind of important aspect as well. So defining, identifying, focusing, and then growing kind of that core understanding with experience, hands-on experience. So the first one is picking a focus. So I just want to unpack these a little bit more. And if I think about the example of getting a job, right? If you think about that process, which is absolutely horrible for most people, is you want to improve certain things for you to get better. Now, for me, it was my career pitch. So one of the things I really needed to improve on was how do I pitch myself, and the experience that I have, and how do I tailor that towards the company that I want to work for? So for me, what I found out that was a bit of a game changer is I would record myself, I would listen, I would watch YouTube videos, and I would practice with my partner, which was actually the hardest part out of all of that. If you have a partner and you've had to pitch them something, it's absolutely dire. But for me, it would just really sharpen my skills. So for me, I picked that focus because I knew that that career pitch is really important, and then I built a set of things around it that really helped me. And that kind of listening back to myself was the big one. The second part is about if you set that core focus and you want to be successful, and you want kind of a successful return on investing in that single focus, you need to avoid this kind of single step mindset that we like to speak quite a lot about in our product leadership program, as an example. And what that means is I'll use an example, like if you want to get better at product strategy, all you're doing is reading a 400-page book on product strategy. So you start at the beginning of the book, you read through it, and then you've achieved your growth. It just doesn't really work like that. And this is where having this single step growth mindset doesn't work for a lot of people. And the more you can get away from following these prescribed steps and figuring out what is that mix of tools and resources that can help you, that's when the learning really sticks a lot more. So I want to share a little bit about some of the thoughts that we have on this approach to kind of avoid that kind of disappointment, and waste of time on your growth. So it's what we call growth stacks. Again, it's kind of just to avoid that single step mindset. Now, a lot of you might be doing some of this stuff already, but a way to kind of break it down is to consider all the different things you can learn and grow from. So as an example, if, I don't know, one of the things that you want to be improving on was around, I don't know, product strategy as an example. So for you, it's about what can you consume? What are the books? What are the articles? What are the podcasts? What are the videos? And identifying what works well for you. Like if you're quite visual, maybe YouTube's the best place for you, or TikTok or something like that. And then on the learning side, like are there courses you can take? Are there meetups you can go to? Are there workshops that you can go to? All focusing on that one specific topic. And then how do you start practicing it? So in your current role, side projects, other roles, but being very deliberate about actually practicing that skill. And then finally, on the people side, and this is where a lot of learning sticks with people, are the managers, peers, mentors, teammates, other folks that you can connect with to help double down on that core skill that you want to improve on. So think about how different this is to, I want to understand AI, so I'm going to read just one book on it. Now, you might start there, but you might find that there's other ways of you learning quicker. Like for me, as an example, I go to a Tuesday meetup on AI for an hour. I learn more in that hour than I do in a month of other stuff. And the format's really different from anything I've ever experienced before. We sit there and read blogs together and talk about it. And it's really impactful. So one of the things I really want you to kind of, we'll share the template out after this, is just to think about the many kind of different ways that you can kind of grow on a specific topic. Any kind of call outs from the group on good ways that you use to kind of upskill or learn about something? What works for you? Curious. Chuck it in the chat or unmute.
Yeah, I guess for me, the people side of things here really works well, especially having a mentor, and also having helpful managers really helps.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome, Valerie. Agree. Thanks for sharing. Anything else was a bit of an unlock or sticks with folks on learning? Let me ask another question. What does not work for you? Like, what have you tried that just does not work? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Usually books.
Books?
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know why, but just you read the long book and then you're like, oh, but where do I start applying all of this into practice? And you need to couple this with some practical things to actually learn.
Yeah. Yeah, agree. Yeah, I agree on some subjects. Anything else?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's
so
that's right. The how you apply kind of what's in the book to your particular context, whether it's different countries, different industries. You, I think quite often you find CEOs have read a particular book and then they've got this mindset that you can just lift and shift what works in a West Coast startup into a multinational billion-dollar business, and it's just going to change overnight and like turn around businesses, and it's not the way it works, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah, agree. And Margaret?
yeah, so if I'm learning a new topic, I tend to struggle with newsletters or articles, mostly because they do not have a systematic explanation or like about what I'm learning. So
Mm,
if like at a new stage, I will not be looking up at articles. I'll be
yeah,
looking through a course, I'll be reading a book.
yeah, yeah, super interesting. And everyone just learns so differently, right? And consumes information differently. That's been one of the really fascinating things about starting and growing Colab actually is just seeing the diversity of how folks learn. All right, awesome. So yeah, just a bit of an example of like what that could look like, right? So if you want to develop your strategic thinking, maybe you'll get like a good core understanding from taking like a product strategy cohort through us or someone else. On the people side, you'll work with some mentoring with strategic leaders and you'll try and practice some of it internally and ask for permission to do that or just do it. And then you'll consume podcasts or you'll kind of read kind of good versus bad strategy. That's actually a very good book if you have not read it. I would recommend it. It's quite practical. Um, but this is kind of that stack, that growth stack that you can develop to start to build your thinking and kind of come at it from different angles. So one of the ways that I first started getting into instructing was I wanted to step into more senior roles, and my manager said you should teach product management. Like, have you ever thought about teaching it? And that's how the whole journey started. And I was like, oh, okay. So I was an assistant teacher, and then I started leading teaching, and then next thing was Colab. So that was like quite a learning experience for me in terms of improving how I think and approach product. Um, so I think the building on kind of the learning stacks, I just want to build on this idea of growth path. So I think a core way to think about your growth is that everyone has a unique growth path. And it's different to others, and there's different unique elements to it as well. So anyone kind of play Pokemon back in the day? Yeah, anyone click cards or anything? Anyway, the Pokemon evolve into different evolutions as they grow, but each one has its own unique path. And I think that it's something that's pretty reflective for like product practitioners. None of us should try to be evolving or copying someone else in terms of how they get there. For me, I think earlier in my career, I was trying to emulate leaders or blogs or what I was seeing. And once I figured out that everyone kind of gets their own way, it was actually a lot more effective. So here's a bit of an example. Yeah, Pokemon was a bit of fun. I wonder if I have the Pokemon Go. Was it? Oh no, was the Pokemon Go the game where they had to go and capture on the
Yep,
phone?
that's still
Yeah,
going.
it's still going. Oh
Yeah,
wow.
still going. Still really popular, I think.
Oh, nice. And then I think the boiling it back down to kind of first principles, and for me, growth paths are kind of this concept that helps you create that impact. And I think one of the equations that we quite like is that it's the impact you're going to have is the environment times the skills times how much you're focusing on growth and what you're doing. So be super aware of that as you kind of think about these new skills that you want to develop this year. So finally, just to kind of help you out with what we covered today, we developed like a really simple growth plan template that you can use. So it's literally just a Word doc, but I've just shared it in the chat so you can click on it, open it up, make a copy of it yourself. And then if you're in our Slack community, share it. Let us know how you got on. Would love to hear if you have any questions on it. If you're not in our Slack community, I can actually share the URL in a moment. I'll do it just right at the end of the call. But yeah, have a crack at it. Let us know how you get on. Before we wrap up, any questions on growth plans, product leadership roles, tenants, anything that I covered today? Okay, I'll keep going. So I think finally, just wrapping up, it's such a sin to have project manager there. I was doing a session with KPMG, so I was talking to them a little bit about product management. But again, I just want to kind of boil it down to that mind shift change, right? Like we've talked a lot about new skills, new capabilities, the optics part, how you get there. And I think one thing I want you to leave with today is what got you to where you are now won't necessarily get you to where you need to be because it's quite different. And it's important to recognize those differences and start to lean into those and start doing them in your own role as well. That's what I'm a big believer in and what we speak with a lot about with the folks who take our programs is you can start doing it now. You can start leading, start asking the right questions, and start to build yourself as a product leader. So how can we help? One of the things I just want to highlight is we've got some programs coming up specifically for the UK as well. So we've got product leadership, which is all about stepping into and thriving as a product leader. That starts next month. And Millie Zah, who is one of the head of product at BT Group, is going to be leading that one. Super excited about having her back. Then we have our advanced product management program, which I'm leading in February. And that essentially is all about what are the key areas you need to improve on across the product development lifecycle to help you thrive as a senior product person. And then finally, product fundamentals. This is probably a little bit junior for folks on the call, but if not, it's an 8-week kind of hands-on program where you can really develop the skills needed to be kind of quite competent in terms of the PM framework. Thank you from all of us at CoLab. Hope you enjoyed the session today. This is a little bit of a snippet of what our programs are like. They're very interactive. Try and keep them quite fun, quite real. Make sure that you can apply it back to your own organization as well. And if you'd like to learn a little bit more about us, this QR code goes to our LinkedIn, I think, or our website. So you can check it out for a little bit more information. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing. And I'll just share our Slack channel if you'd like to join it. But if you've got any questions, I can answer those while I pull this up.
Yeah, actually, I had one question. So I was wondering about, situations where the kind of product leadership role is kind of belonging to a different person or, implied to belong to a different person, like the founder, for example, right? And then there's a situation where you also kind of maybe want to move a bit more into this role, but you're not sure how to approach this transition. So I just want to know if you had any experience in this.
Sorry, Valerie, I kind of missed the first part. So do you mind reframing it?
Sure, yeah. So I was saying about a situation where, the product leadership role is with someone else, like the founder of a company, right? Or the CEO, especially like for smaller companies, I think that's the case sometimes. And then how do you manage this kind of transition into the leadership role in this case when it's already this role is with someone else, and maybe there's a bit of tension as well that arises from that.
Well, I think the first thing is to acknowledge that's a difficult situation to be in. I think as a founder myself and having worked in startups where I'm working with the CEO or founder, it's almost impossible to never stop them thinking like a product person. So they've grown it from the beginning, they've gone through all the steps, they know everything about it. And it's very difficult to shift their mind away from wanting to be involved in some of the smaller decisions, wanting to be involved in the product strategy or the product. Now, I think what I would recommend is there could be a few things going on in terms of is there enough trust there? Do they feel like you have enough context? So for me, when I was facing this challenge once with a former CEO, I would do a weekly deep dive with them and play back what I'm seeing. And for me, it was about how do I ensure that I establish myself as that product person with all the context. And I'm still going to ask for your advice. I'm still going to ask for your tips, but I'm going to start making more of those decisions. So I think the first thing was like make sure the trust is there. That's kind of the foundational part of it. And then I think the second element is it's important to, and you need to be quite delicate about how you do this, but while you're building that trust, I think it's important for you to have a perspective on what are some of the areas that you could be leaning into and supporting them to free them up to do other things. So for me, it was about identifying if there's specific things that the CEO is doing in the product world that you can step into or support them on, whether it's kind of longer term product strategy or engaging with key customers. Start being like, hey, I can do that. I can help you out, and it can free you up to do other things. And then I think finally, just having a conversation about it, being like, hey, having a frank kind of open conversation around your ambitions and what you want to do, and I guess the benefit you think it would give to the company. There's a couple of areas you need to be careful of. Like you need to make sure that you don't blindside them in terms of like, hey, stop doing the role because I think you're really average at sales, or you're not leading the rest of the company, as an example. So I think that's where that trust comes from. But yeah, that's kind of some of the areas that that come to mind. I'm happy to chat with you more about it. Hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. I think that this deserves a separate presentation, to be honest, because it's a really big topic.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's a good idea.
Thank you.
All right, folks. Anything else before we sign off? Okay. All right. Well, look, keep in touch. Be great to have you in the Colab ecosystem. We've got some great programs coming up. Even if you don't take a program, sign up to future events, stay involved. And yeah, if you do have any questions, reach out to myself or the team. And with that, enjoy your afternoon. We've got another Colab London event coming up next month. I think some people on the call may have gone to the last one. But yeah, feel free to join. There's small kind of intimate sessions, and yeah, we'd love to see you there. All right, see you later.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thanks.